Hello folks, this is a deck profile for my Mermail Atlantean deck that helped Team Mermail to a second place finish in the Swiss rounds and a second place finish in the top 8 of the most recent Discord tournament. My deck had a personal record of 6-2 after 8 total rounds of tournament play, and I really enjoyed playing the list. The goal was always to be able to play Yu-Gi-Oh! And never beat myself with bricks, so to achieve that I lowered the maximum power ceiling of the deck in exchange for cards that dramatically increased consistency. This resulted in some nail-biter wins that I could have closed out faster with a more explosive list, but also allowed me to claw my way back into games that more combo-focused lists would not have been able to handle. Overall, I would change very little about this deck, except some cards in the sideboard, but we'll get right into it. To start off, we have 3 Mermail Abyss Tias. He's obviously the critical part of the deck, and in this tournament he definitely retained his status as the best Mermail. The way I built my deck was geared towards consistent access to some plays all the time, even if those plays are subpar. And for this, Tias was the linchpin, because summoning him gives you access to Abyssal Acacia or Coral Anemone at a bare minimum by just summoning Tias and then normaling the pike that you search. Even the worst hands, if they had Tias access, were pretty good hands. There were 2 rounds during the tournament I was able to use Tias to make just enough plays to get myself another turn and pull off the win. Once I used Tias and Pike to make Abyssal Acacia and searched Crystron Thistburn. Then I got Alacia's float effect off and got back into the game that way. And then once I discarded a Deep Sea Minstrel, then summoned it back off of an enemy, and I got really lucky with the mill effect of Minstrel and was able to win the game from there. 2 Mermail Abyss Megalo. This guy is a powerhouse. He's an OTK machine. He always has been. I found myself not using his effect to close out games as much as I have in the past. Instead, I mostly used him for rank 7s or level 8 synchros, but I wasn't ever unhappy to draw him, and I made him every single game. If I was winning the game, I probably made summon Megalo at some point. I feel 2 is the right number. You will always want to use 1 on your first turn to get the Mizuchi for a spell negate, and you still want to have another one in deck later to search to close out the game. Then we have 1 Abyss Gund and 1 Abyss Pike. These are my 2 Abyss Teus targets. Gund was searched more often than Pike because I could often link off Teus or Megalo and then summon them back. Pike was pretty solid because he could search Deep Sea Minstrel to protect your more explosive plays, and he could also search Crystron Thistburn, Atlantean Marksman, or Abyss Gund, depending on what you needed at the time. Him being a level 4 was crucial in one match to normal summon and help synchro for Trishula. Then we've got 3 Deep Sea Diva and 3 Neptibus the Atlantean Prince. Lumped them together because they're both kind of the best starters in the deck. I almost always went with Neptibus blind because I feared Ash Blossoms and Impermanences on the Diva. It paid off a few times with my Neptibus getting hit by a hand trap like an Ash Blossom, but I still got some advantage from the cost where a Diva would have just been useless and almost been a pass turn. If I ever happened to have Minstrel in my hand already before the normal summon, or if I needed like a desperate breakout play to win, I would always go for the Diva. But it did bite me in the butt a couple of times. Diva's really nice just because of Halqifibrax existing now and my increased focus on synchros in general. I made all kinds of Trishula plays and Coral Dragon plays and Halqifibrax plays with Diva all tournament. It was really good. Then you've got 3 Atlantean Dragoons, 2 Atlantean Heavy Infantry, and 1 Atlantean Marksman. These are the Atlanteans to send off of the Neptibus. 3 Dragoons is an obvious must run just with the non-once per turn search. Marksman actually came in pretty clutch as a back row removal one time. He helped me push for game a couple of times, and he allowed me to summon Neptibus from deck once. Marksman definitely earned his keep as a 1-of slot. Heavy Infantry, I ran 2 copies, but I would probably bump it to 3. Face-up destruction is pretty great right now, especially in combination with Abyssal Acacia's effect on the opponent's turn, and that's actually one of our premier interruptions. It's also really nice as an extender, just giving you the extra normal summon. That won me 2 separate games individually by summoning this back off of Coral Anemone, and then being able to, or Neptibus, summon it back off Coral Anemone or Neptibus, and then being able to go into Deep Sea Diva play in the middle of a turn to help shut the door on a win. So in a future tournament, I'd probably bump to 3 Dragoons and 3 Infantry and 1 Marksman. 1 Lapis Dragon. I believe this is mandatory now that we have Halqifibrax, Adamantia Dragite, Ravenous Crocus, or Arcathis. I bricked up on it about 6 times, which was terrible, but I was able to summon it as a absolutely critical, like I could not have won the game without it, combo piece and extender a lot of times. It's also the most reliable Sea Serpent extender to get off of Dragoons, because Megalo needs discards and Mooling Glacier needs a setup graveyard ahead of time. So Lapis is, I think, a mandatory 1-of. It was unfortunate that I drew it so much, but sometimes that is what it is. We have 2 Deep Sea Minstrel and 1 Deep Sea Artisan. The 1 Artisan actually I put in at the last minute, and I'm glad I did because it was really useful for its level and effect multiple times in the tournament. I used it to grab cards from the graveyard for extension by summoning it off of Coral Anemone or Prima Donna, and I used its hand rip effect a couple times with the Prima Donna to permanently rip a card that your opponent thought was going to be safe. I also used it as a level 2 non-tuner to make Trishula, so the Artisan, or I guess the Sentry was worth it. Minstrel, I would probably bump up to 3 copies as opening. It gives an incredible amount of insurance against like Nibiru, devastating hand trap. I lost 2 games exclusively because of Nibiru, and Called by the Grave misses out on that, but Minstrel hits it. And it's also a discard outlet, so Minstrel's really good for the deck. 1 Mullen Glacia. I'm on the fence about this card because I had to avoid making it due to my opponent getting graveyard advantage from it a couple times, and I got in trouble with the Lost Battle phase a few times as well, but overall, the power level of discard 2 at random from your opponent's hand is too high to ignore, and it's a great Sea Serpent extender in general. Then we've got 3 Swap Frog here, and 1 Ronin Totem, and 1 Testudo Era Newman to go with it. This is my Frog package. Swap Frog was really, really awesome. It was Nibiru protection through the tournament. It was an extender that I just could generically use for all kinds of plays. I was actually able to properly summon Totally Awesome many times with it, and because it was properly summoned, I was able to revive it with Abyssalacious Graveyard effect on float, which I did twice. The only annoying piece of Swap Frog is that it doesn't synergize with the Lanteans at all because it's got this weird summoning effect. But that's not enough to outweigh the benefits of just naturally summoning a Totally Awesome and being a free leak material. Testudo Era Newman single-handedly won me 2 matches by preventing me from being Kaiju'd, but was less impressive than I would have wanted, locking me out of certain plays unless out of the floodgate for my opponent. So I'm kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place there, where I either can't make plays because I have the turtle, or if I make the plays, I better win because now he's unlocked his hand. I would still run 3 Swap and 1 Ronin in any build that intends to go first, but Newman is maybe on the chopping block for now to make space for some of the other cards I want, like the 3rd Heavy Infantry. Then I've got 1 Aqua Spirit. It's my favorite level 4 extender by far. He was an Aqua to tribute for Totally Awesome. I made Trishula with him once, made Abyss Dweller with him once. I used him to make Deep Sea Princess Prima Donna once. I even used him to adjust my graveyard for a Mullen Glacia play one time. It was a solid role player. I was never sad to open it. I actually might even consider 2 copies of Aqua Spirit. It's just that good. We've got 1 Fishborg Launcher, which is kind of my Halqifibrax go-to target, and it's the reason for the synchro focus of the deck. I made this every single game I possibly could with Halki. I made Trishula with it, I made Arcthis with it, I made Adamassia Dragite and White Aura Whale with it. I will run this forever or until Halki is banned, whichever comes last. This card is awesome. Then we have 1 Crystron Thistvern, 1 Crystron Rosenix. They kind of pad out the deck list a little bit with useful waters. Thistvern works with Mermail Abyss Pike, is a level 3 to search. It's also the best Swap Frog discard fodder because you can discard Thistvern, search Rosenix, then discard Rosenix, make a token. So then you end up with a Totally Awesome and a Rosenix token without using your normal summon. Halqifibrax and Trishula are easier to summon without using your meaningful monsters. Rosenix is great because the level 1 token makes powerhouse cards like Coral Anemone and Halqifibrax and Trishula easier to summon without using meaningful monsters on the field or having to bend over backwards to do it. I would for sure continue to run these, at least until we get better water monsters like Crystal Girl. Onto the spells. 1 for 1. Summoning Neptibus from deck is incredible. I did summon Fishborg Launcher once just to get the body and the multi-use body and the tuner. And you can actually summon Testudo Era Newman if your hand is really, really good, just to finish off a board. Biscilla the Mizuchi, great generic spell negate. I used it to beat 2 super polymerizations in the tournament, and I was able to protect it from being broken by field spells using my Adamassia Dragites or Totally Awesomes. It did go to waste in a few games, just with the Plunder Patrol field spell or other cards like that, negating it when they activate and it's just sitting there useless. But the upside of being searchable by Megalo, enabling OTKs, and being a negation, it's just too good to pass up. 2 Deep Sea Aria. This is a fine number for Aria. I think it can brick a little bit with the hard once per turn, and when you require a water engrave to even activate it, sometimes you don't want to banish the water you have engraved and you have to pick. But overall, I was very happy with the 2 copies. Never got stuck with it in my hand, and no waters engraved, and I never had 2 copies of it at the same time. I may test 3 copies in the future anyways, just because it is access to the strongest cards in our deck with the Diva and the Neptibus, but overall, 2 copies was fine. I did use it to search Heavy Infantry, to use it in Abyssalacia in 2 different games, but the rest of the time it was always Diva, Neptibus, or Minstrel if I already had Diva or Neptibus. Then we have 1 Foolish Burial. It's kind of here as a glue card for synergy with the deck. Allows me to adjust my water count in the grave, summon any water with less than 1500 attack from the deck by using Coral Anemone access. Lets you set up Fishborg Launcher. You can send Rosenix to get the token, send Thistfern to get the Rosenix. You can send a Ronin Totem or the Swamp Frog for Ronin Totem fodder. It's just a role player. It can do a lot of different things. It's not a flashy card, but it's incredibly flexible, and I was never sad to open it. And I would absolutely run it again as long as I'm running Crystron, Rosenix, and Thistfern. If I were to cut these, I would probably not run Foolish Burial. Then we have one Monster Reborn. It's Monster Reborn. I could always run it just on those merits alone, but specifically I did manage to use it to bring back a dead Neptibus and combo off one game when it got hit by a Solemn. But otherwise, not much to say about Monster Reborn. And then the one Pot of Avarice. I think 1 is the exact correct number for this deck. I won 2 games with it exclusively by shuffling back key cards that I needed back to the extra deck and using them again. And once the hand advantage it gave allowed me to grant to my opponent. But I don't think that Mermails loads the grave aggressively enough to run 3 copies of Avarice. So 1 copy is very nice and it's the best top deck. But any more than that, and you run a real chance of drawing it and not being able to use it. So I'd stick to 1 copy. I'm going to move on to the sideboard. My sideboard suffered a bit because I was very, very afraid of Mystic Mine. There was a Mystic Mine team in the tournament specifically, and I was terrified of just losing to that automatically. So I have a weird sideboard that you maybe can see a sneak preview of here. I started with 1 evenly matched, 3 Dark Ruler or more, and 3 Gamma Seal, the Sea Turtle Kaiju. These are my go second board breakers. I would not really change these ratios except maybe to slide in more evenly matched if I can. I actually never drew Dark Ruler when I sided in, but it was the only top deck that could have possibly won me the game. In 4 of my 6 losses, the only card that could have won me the game going second was Dark Ruler or more, and nothing else would have done it. So the fact that I needed to pray to top deck exactly this, or just lose, is proof enough to keep it in the sideboard. I think it's a mandatory sideboard card for every deck going forward. I have 1 Red Reboot, which I never brought in, and honestly, I might even cut it for a second evenly matched. It wasn't really that useful. I'm running 1 Galaxy Cyclone, 1 Cosmic Cyclone, 1 Heavy Storm Duster as like insurance against prohibition effects. And I was just cripplingly afraid of Mystic Mine having field barriers and prohibitions and DD guys that they give you cards. You can't use Lightning Storm. And I just didn't want them to get automatic wins. So I ran 1 of each of these to hedge my bets against prohibition. Realistically, though, Cosmic was nice to have in a few games because it was a quick spell and a chainable. But the Galaxy Cyclone and the Heavy Storm Duster should have absolutely been Lightning Storms at a minimum. My teammates used it for blowouts. I just needed Lightning Storms. Maybe I would cut the Red Reboot, the Galaxy Cyclone, and the Heavy Storm Duster, and then just keep the Cosmic Cyclone and have 3 Lightning Storm here. Then I've got 3 Solemn Judgment and 1 Imperial Order. These are my going first sideboard cards. The 3 Judgments I brought in every single time I went first, and I was never sad to draw it at all. So I would keep these. The Imperial Order, I sided in a few times and I never saw it, so I can't really speak to it. But in theory, it's a great sideboard card for going first, because when your opponent sides in Dark Rulers or Lightning Storm or Mind Control or anything like that, or if they're a spell-based deck, you just want to have an Imperial Order up. So even though I never drew it, I would probably still continue to run it. Got to run Imperial Order. And that's kind of it for the sideboard. Now for the extra deck. We got 2 Abyssalacia. I ran 2 last minute, and I was really glad to have that second copy. It's not a flashy card, but it is just critical for the always have a play style of deck building I went through for this tournament, where I just wanted to always be able to make at least 1 meaningful play every game. If a hand could access Abyssalacia, the odds were that I could at least make a showing of myself that game, between the float effect, forcing my opponents to maybe play suboptimally to get around the float effect, being able to get a discard on your opponent's turn, search Abyss TS, like it fixes hands, it floats, it's annoying. I actually used the attack boost to go for game a couple of times. It can wear Abyss Scale the Mizuchi, which no other Link monster can do, so I ended up making it just to wear the Spell Negate more than once. It throws heavy infantries at people on their turn as a good interrupt, which is why I want to run more infantry. Abyssalacia was awesome the entire tournament, and I did make the second copy in a significant number of games. 1 Crystron Halqifibrax, the new broke guy in town. I use him 90% of the time just to summon Fishborg Launcher from the deck. And I actually did use him about 10% of the time to make Deep Sea Minstrel or Prima Donna from the deck to make a synchro play for something like a Trishula. I was also able to use him to float into Coral Dragon or Deep Sea Prima Donna a few times, which was very nice to just solidify games. Then I've got 1 Mistar Boy. He's a necessary evil. I don't like having to run him, but I really can't cut him. He allows you to turn your Rosenix tokens or Halqifibraxes or Coral enemies into an Abyssalacia because he's an Aqua, and the attack buff for your entire board is pretty clutch. I also did get the float effect off with him once when I got Lightning Stormed. We've got 1 Coral enemy, which was just a critical card and an extra staple for Mermails going forward. Summoning all kinds of things back. You can summon back Neptibus, you can summon back Swap Frog, You can summon back Lapis Dragon. You can summon back Deep Sea Princess Prima Donna. You can summon back Crocosaur Arcthis. You can summon back Testudo Newman. Like this thing is incredible, and a lot of games came down to me summoning an Neptibus, it getting killed immediately, then extending a little bit with like a Rosenix token or an Abystius or something, making an enemy, bringing back the Neptibus, and continuing and being able to win the game that way. Then we have one Blackluster Soldier, Soldier of Chaos, as the last link. I just consider him an honorary Mermail at this point. I've been running him for a long time, and he's just easy to summon with his effect activated. He's hard to out, and he was my only out to some tough enemy monsters a few times. I made him to out fully powered Crusadia Avermax by negating the Avermax and then attacking. This thing is absolutely worth running. Then we've got one Totally Awesome, which I only ever summoned off a Swamp Frog, obviously, but whenever I did summon it, it slammed the door on the game. Protection from Nibiru, protection from Lightning Storm, protection from Evenly Matched. Summons a Swamp Frog from the deck. When it dies, you get Ronin Totem in the graveyard, and you have 2 swaps in the graveyard usually. So it's just a bunch of link material, and it adds any water from graveyard to hand. It truly lives up to its name as a totally awesome card. We've got Abyss Dweller, it's the best rank 4, proc Dragoons, locked out the graveyard as an auto win versus a lot of decks, including the Mirror Match. I'd always run it. One Abyss Gaios, which is the archetypal rank 7, and he's a behemoth. He's like a one-time use skill drain. I did win a game because he prevented my opponent from attacking. He also wears the skill of the Mizuchi, which is nice. Then we've got Coral Dragon as both a tuner to summon off of Halki, and you can make him with Neptibus and Lapis Dragon to pop problem cards. He draws cards and sent to grave. He's just a good role player. It fills a lot of niches that the deck needs, just as like Neptibus normal summon, send Dragoons, add infantry, summon Lapis Dragon. Then you can discard the infantry for the Coral Dragon, pop 2 cards. It's just nice to have. We've got the one Deep Sea Prima Donna. This gal was incredible. I actually went into the tournament with the goal of testing her out a little bit more thoroughly. I did have to bend over backwards to summon her more than I'd like, but whenever I did, she was amazing. Lets you summon Neptibus, Testudo from deck, Swamp Frog from deck. You can also summon Deep Sea Minstrel, Artisan, Heavy Infantry, Mermail Abyss Pike happened once. The list goes on. She's just a really solid card. She makes the Minstrel and the Artisan hand loops permanent. It's just a good card to have. And you can summon it back off of the Alacia Float or summon it off of the Coralline enemy and just keep using it. Actually, I won a game because I used her effect to recycle my banished Halqifibrax, then summoned the Halqifibrax, got a tuner from deck, and made Trishula. And that was the only way I could have won that game, was Prima Donna recycling the Halki to use again. So just a lot of synergy here. Adamantium Rise, Dragite. This is my going first level 8 synchro. I made it with Abystius or Megalo and Fishborg Launcher every single time. And it was just really nice protection for boards. It protected my Mizuchi by negating their bait spells if I wanted to. It's just going to be a staple going forward, or at the very least, it'll be a staple as long as Halqifibrax and Launcher are around. Then we've got one White Aura Whale, which just saved 2 games entirely by itself with the board wipe effect, and it saved a 3rd game by floating a couple of times. I could cut it. It's probably the weakest synchro I'm running, but it's just, I like it too much to drop it, frankly. One Ravenous Krakosaur Arctisthis, which is great to go into with Diva and Teus, or Diva and Megalo. I did draw a game-winning card off of it one time when I had no other outs. Otherwise, I barely used it. Most of the time, if I had 9 on the board, I could make Trishula, and I preferred summoning Trishula when I could. I also would often make Alacia or Halki instead, but I probably wouldn't cut it because of the niche it fills, where it's a level 9 water synchro with discard synergy that you can make with Diva and a 7. That's too many rolls at once, so I'd probably keep it no matter what. And then we have one Trishula Dragon of the Ice Barrier. Let me just say, Trish is still awesome. By herself, easily won me 4 of the games that I played. Outing problem monsters, depleting graveyard resources, ripping away a Nibiru that my opponent had in hand and that otherwise would have ended my turn by just summoning 2 monsters and using a leftover to make Trishula and removing the Nibiru that way. Trishula was awesome. I'm glad to see it make a resurgence. It's easier to make than ever with Fishborg Launcher and Halqifibrax. Anyways, that's it for the deck profile. I hope you guys enjoyed, and if you like the content, please subscribe for more. Thanks.